Welcome back to the second round table.
Gracias por volver a esta segunda mesa redonda que será en inglés. Si alguien necesita cascos para la traducción, por favor, podéis recogerlos en la entrada. Vamos a hablar las experiencias internacionales comparando experiencias jurídicas sobre el legado de artistas visuales. Y en primer lugar quiero agradecer a la Fundación Gaveiras por haberme pedido y al Goethe-Institut que me hablaron sobre este proyecto tan interesante e importante, y quiero decir de inmediato que es importante no solo para España, sino también para verlo desde una perspectiva europea o internacional, porque aunque el contexto jurídico en diferentes países es diferente, creo que la situación de muchos artistas es comparable en diferentes países, y también pienso que las realidades de vida y de trabajo de muchos artistas es internacional en cualquier caso y atraviesa las fronteras. Por eso estoy muy contenta de que hoy podamos compartir, escuchar y aprender de otras experiencias, y sobre todo de estas dos grandes experiencias que tenemos hoy aquí. Así que muchas gracias a Caroline Black, a Loretta Butenweg, a la que aún no vemos, pero que está con nosotras virtualmente desde Berlín.
Is Loretta there as well?
Loretta está ahí. ¿Podemos verla?
Maybe we can put Loretta
Quizás
Württemberger on the screen as well.
Podemos verla en la pantalla.
Maybe put her large. Well, she is there.
Bueno,
as you
está
saw,
ahí,
but,
hemos visto.
Hi, Loretta.
Hola,
can you hear
Loretta,
us?
¿nos escuchas?
I can hear you, but I have a problem because I can only hear the Spanish translator. And I cannot hear.
Solo puedo escuchar
that's a
al
problem.
traductor.
So, can somebody check
¿Alguien puede
what
comprobar
the technical problem
el
is? She can
problema
only
técnico? Solo
hear
puede
the Spanish
escuchar la
translation, but
traducción
she, of
española.
course, needs to hear
Pero por supuesto necesita escucharnos hablando en inglés.
Loretta, we are taking care of that.
Loretta nos...
It should be only a second.
Okay, but now I can hear you. Maybe
Yeah?
because the translator is not translating, I have no idea, or because it was fixed.
We can try. But so you also hear me, right, Loretta?
Now I can hear you. Hello.
Okay, very good. Hi, Loretta.
How are you?
Very, very nice meeting you, at least virtually. So as I was, and Loretta, you give us a sign if ever there is a technical problem, if you don't hear the right language or something, or if you have problems understanding, let us know. We see and hear you well. So for us, I think everything works well. Maybe just to also for the two of you, we have been talking this morning because there has already been a round table about legacies of artists, not only as a juridical question in connection to many times also the precarious living conditions of artists, but also as an essential element of contemporary artists' memory for the public in general. And so I think these are also points that we will be mentioning in our discussion. But first of all, I would like to introduce the two of you and give you some space to explain a little bit what you're doing and the institutions that you're working for. We'll start with Caroline Black, who's here on my left-hand side. Caroline Black is the program director of the Pollock-Krasner Foundation in New York. She began her tenure in '97, and for more than 2 decades, she has overseen the foundation's grant program, which awards grants to visual artists and organizations nationally and internationally. Since its inception in '85, the foundation has rewarded nothing less than $78 million to over 4,600 artists in 78 countries. and has worked to increase recognition and appreciation of the legacy of Lee Krasner. Prior to joining the Pollock-Krasner Foundation, Black managed the David Beitzel Gallery in Soho for 3 years, championing emerging and mid-career artists. She has also worked within the museum field, serving in the curatorial department at the Yale Center for British Art in New Haven, Connecticut, conducting research for future exhibitions. She graduated with a BA and honors in art history from Connecticut College in New London, Connecticut, and completed her MA in art history from Columbia University in New York. She is board president and co-founder of Endeavor Therapeutic Horsemanship, a nonprofit in Bedford, New York, which provides high-quality, innovative, equine-assisted activities and therapies for children and adults with special needs. She joined the Artist Legacy Foundation board in 2020. Caroline, thanks for being here, and thanks for sharing with us a bit of your experiences and insights.
Wonderful, thank you. It's really an honor to be here. I wanted to thank the Giberas Foundation, Roger Dideo, Raquel Rivera, and Luis Penuelas, who invited me to be part of this really interesting conversation. I've been at the foundation for almost 27 years. The bulk of that time, I was the grant program director, so oversaw the robust outreach that the foundation, where we give grants to artists in, actually it's 79 countries now, which is really exciting. And the foundation has an interesting history. As you probably all know, Jackson Pollock died in a car crash in 1956. And he and Lee Krasner were married and they had no children. So fast forward to 1984, when Lee Krasner died, she had a very simple mission and a very simple will. And it was really her lawyer, Gerald Dickler, who was our first chairman at the foundation, that mapped the road for this private foundation. The foundation really, there were not a lot of artist endowed foundations. In the 1980s, there was the Warhol Foundation, the Gottlieb Foundation, but there really wasn't a blueprint for what our foundation does. Most organizations in the US give grants to organizations, not individuals. We're one of the very few, and we remain one of the very few that actually give money directly to artists. So Krasner dies. In her will, she simply states, create a foundation to directly support individual artists, painters, sculptors, and printmakers. She was very literal, because that's what she thought was art. We've expanded that, obviously, as multimedia and video components and photography, but she was just very direct, and that was it. So the board, which was very small, had the task of setting forth the foundation's mission and its grant guiding principles. So we have our grant program. That's the main part. That's 80% of what we do. And then we have our legacy and scholarship stewardship of both Pollock and Krasner's legacy. Obviously, we're more focused on Krasner at this point because Pollock, everybody knows about Jackson Pollock. Krasner is really coming into her own now, and that's something that we're really excited about. And I hope some of you may have seen her fabulous retrospective here in Europe in 2019, which opened at the Barbican and then traveled to Frankfurt and Bern and ended up at the Guggenheim Bilbao in the middle of COVID, which was unfortunate, but it was really a stupendous exhibition, and I think got a lot of attention here in Europe, which we were really, really happy about. So we have our grants, we have the scholarship and legacy oversight, and we also have a great deal of artwork. So we steward the collections that Lee had when she died. So we have a number of her paintings, it works on paper and prints. They're represented by Casman Gallery in New York, and they help us when the time comes to sell a work carefully. And then we also have some Pollock paintings, works on paper from the 40s and 50s, and a print collection as well. So we steward their inventories, which are part of our, they're under our oversight, and the foundation owns those works. We have our endowment oversight. So when Krasner died, she had about $15 million in investments, and the rest was all in artwork. And unlike here in Spain, we were able to, I've learned a lot on this trip, I just say, about what we can do. We can sell work to internationally of theirs to improve our endowment. So occasionally we do sell a painting, and all that does is go into our investments. That $15 million is now roughly 70 million. And then plus the artwork. So the investment income, we have to carefully manage with our financial advisors, the oversight of the foundation's assets. And that enables us to then turn around and give away around $3 million a year to individual artists. And then we really focus on the grant program. So that's where the majority of everyone's efforts go. We receive probably 2,000 applications a year from individual artists from all over the world. And we award anywhere from 150 to 200 grants to those individuals. So about 8% of those who apply get grants. We have a rigorous selection process where we have curators, museum directors, art critics that form a committee that really are focused on looking at the artist's work. Once they go through that process, we award grants on a rolling basis. We have 3 or 4 board meetings a year. We make a lot of people's lives a little more interesting and able to really complete interesting projects. The artists we fund range anywhere from emerging artists, young artists, mid-career artists, to older artists. We have a special Lifetime Achievement Award for older artists whose work is exemplary, and that's a 3-year grant, $35,000 US a year for 3 years, which is a really, it's a grant program I'm really proud of. You know, to give you an idea, our average grant is in that range, $30,000 to $35,000. So it really can enable an artist to rent a separate studio, produce a catalog, archive their work, take time off from their day job so they can spend time in the studio. I mean, you name it, we're very open, and we don't expect anything in return. At the end of the grant year, we just ask for a brief narrative. This is what I did, and this is where I spent the money, but none of it is official or formalized or accounting paperwork. It's just anecdotal. That's basically what we do. And I think that Lee Krasner, had she been not married to Jackson Pollock, would have likely been applying to our foundation. So I think that she knew the importance, and we were talking about this on the stage, the importance that, you know, it all comes down to finances. And, you know, I think that we're really proud of the work, and like I said, varying artists in different parts of their career have different needs. So we hopefully can help fill a gap when it's appropriate to do so. So that's the Pollock-Krasner Foundation.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. I'll now like to present Loretta Württemberger. Loretta Württemberger is the director of the Institute for Artists at States in Berlin, a central reference point for all matters concerning artists at states, with focuses on research, networking, managing, and consulting. After studying law, philosophy, and art history, Loretta earned her doctorate in international copyright and patent law at the Max Planck Institute, subsequently becoming the youngest ever judge at the Berlin District Court. She has been managing the estates of Hans Arp and Sophie Teuber-Arp since 2009. She has been a partner at Fine Arts Partners since 2009 and is the co-founder of Contemporary Art Alliance, a non-profit organization supporting young contemporary artists in Berlin. Loretta has been lecturing regularly at universities across Europe for over 15 years. She's the author of the book, The Artisted State, a handbook for artists, executors, and heirs, published in June 2016 by Hatje Kans Verlag. Loretta, thanks a lot for being here. The floor is yours.
Hello. First of all, sorry for me not being able to be with you. We are ourselves in preparation for a 3-day event next week, where we will be bringing together 25 estates and people dealing with estates, children, wives of artists. And we will have 10 experts of the field and be working together for 3 days. So it would have just been too much to come now just prior to that event to Madrid, which a city I love, and I'm really sad not to be able to be there. And it's wonderful to be having this talk together with Caroline Black. We haven't met in person yet, Caroline, but I think we should, because obviously we have two passions together. One is the art and taking care of artist estates, but the second one is horses. I just heard very attentively about your nonprofit engagement with horses. So that's also a passion of mine, and I'd be happy to share that as well with you.
It's a date.
The date, yeah. So the Institute for Artist Estates, I founded, how long is it ago? When did we found it? 2015, I think you know it probably better because you have the resume there. Was founded out of a position where we ourselves had the feeling we are alone with the task we inherited. The grandfather of my husband was a Bauhaus artist. And quite out of the blue, because we didn't expect us to inherit it, we inherited his estate in the beginning of 2010. It was a similar time we had started working with the Arp estate. And I felt that there was not really a research institution or also a networking institution we could turn to. And before founding the Institute for Artist Estates, I wanted to learn from those which had done it much longer than we have. And I went a lot to New York because there are amazing institutions there. There's the Judd Foundation. There are so many very much more professional foundations at that time than we had in Europe, which also had to do with the fact that the generation of the artists being very successful commercially in the 40s and 50s were more in New York than after the war in Europe. And that led to artist estates or artist endowed foundations, which had much more money, which led to more professional structures, more professional resources around the whole field, developing in New York and much earlier than they did it, develop in Europe. And I went to them and asked them, how did you do it? And what would you like to share with me and other estates maybe? What were your learnings? What would you say what we shouldn't do? And what were your learnings, what we should do? And out of that very interesting time of maybe 3 years where I had talks with over 60 artist estates, I wrote the book, the Artist Estate, bringing together all those findings. And one thing I had learned again and again, and that's why it's so fantastic that you're also doing this conference, is it's a topic in which many felt alone. They had the feeling if they're a wife or a child or a caretaker of an artist estate, where are people like me? Where are people with similar problems? And that was the moment where we said, we want to bring together in Europe people in similar situations. You in the United States have the Aspen Institute Initiative, something similar we don't have. And I believe in Europe, we also have a much greater variety of legal backgrounds of artist foundations, artist estates. And that has not only to do with the various legislations we have in Europe, but it also has to do with this tax system, that we don't have this major path like you do, like with artist endowed foundations, because otherwise tax situations couldn't be solved post-mortem. And so we try to take all that into account. We have been doing conferences on artist estates, and we have been doing these 3-day workshops, which have been proven to be really amazing because we can work for 3 days from morning to the evenings together with those who have these questions, the wives, the children, the caretakers, the lawyers. And we were interrupted by Corona, as we all were. And now it's next week for the first time that we're taking this up again since 4 years. The previous workshops were in Los Angeles and London and Berlin. So we are trying to bring people together. We're trying to bring the best experts together. We are trying to publicize and keep the book updated. And so that's what we are doing.
Thanks a lot, Loretta. Maybe to start with some questions and to come back to the specific context the two of you are working in. Can you make up any specific patterns of the challenges, of the social, of the judicial challenges contemporary artists are facing? Caroline, you were mentioning also the award that you have for the Lifetime Achievement. So there is like a specific compensation for older artists. Krasner was also a female artist. Do you see any patterns that you can make up? And are there any specific reactions from the foundation for these needs, for these specific needs that the artists are working in?
You know, I think that I'm sure Loretta sees this too. I think that with a lot of older artists, a trend that we're really seeing is artists trying to sort out what they're going to do with their work and what they're going to do with to protect their legacy. And I think it's an incredibly difficult issue because I think it all revolves around support and money and marketability of the artwork. I think you know, I was telling Roger and Raquel earlier this week about an artist friend of mine who we actually gave a Krasner Award to, and she's got a studio in Rio and New York, and she was an activist in the 70s, and she's got a very large body of work, and she's got about $2 million to her name. And she said, there's no way that $2 million is going to support my storage, conserving my work, hiring a curator to keep it in museum, you know, in shows. And she said, I don't know what I'm going to do. You know, her children aren't interested. Her husband has passed away. And so she's looking at she says it's her first child, is her artwork, and what is she going to do for her first child? And I think that that's something that we're seeing more and more, particularly with the growth of artist-endowed foundations, of artists trying to set up some structure to take care of their legacies, but not necessarily having the funds to do so. So that's, I think, a big problem. And I don't know the answer to how to solve it, but I bet Loretta has some ideas.
I mean, Loretta, you were mentioning you're doing a lot of research. So what do you see? Do you see any patterns? Do you see maybe also coming back a bit to the legal frame that you were saying, and also to the challenges in administering the estates? What can you tell us about that from your experience?
Well, first of all, I mean, the financial challenge, Caroline, I neither have an answer to that. And it's the fact that also in Europe, artist estates are not supported by governments in any important mean. And there are small little initiatives here and there, but nothing which can really solve the problem. So it's always a privately funded endeavor. And it always comes to the fact, is there a market for the work? And in the world we live in today, it's very seldom that the market suddenly appears post-mortem. And so if you don't have proper market during the lifetime, the chance of having that posthumously is almost zero. So it's a sad answer for many artists. And I mean, the example you were giving with $2 million, I mean, that's a lot of money for an artist already. And it's really frustrating to hear that even she said it won't be enough. But I would like to point maybe to a couple of further challenges. because I also see a huge emotional challenge for the topic. Many artists, they don't want to deal with this question often at the end of their lifetime. I mean, it's all for us, it's all emotionally challenging to deal with our own termination. And I always try to build an emotional bridge for the artist by saying it's like creating your last artwork. So not the first artwork, like your friend was phrasing it, but the last artwork. And creating an estate is also at the same time a creative act in which you show your personality. And often that's a bridge the artist can walk over. I'm currently working, for example, together with an Austrian artist called Erwin Wurm, who is very, very much alive. He's very active. He's turning 70, but he's amazing. And he's saying, I'm trying to see it that way and try to plan it as early as possible. And I think that's the next advice. Start as early as possible, because then the next challenge comes. This thing is a family affair often. And if I see it with my mandates, the artist might give the initial start for the process, but getting all the emotions underneath the relationship with the children and getting them involved with the estate and asking them, do you want to do this? Under what circumstances do you want to do this? Under what preconditions do you want to do this? Maybe there's a second young wife. How do you want to deal with that? That's often a very emotional and very long process. So starting early is important, to not end in a fight, but end in something which then can be transformed in the next step into something professional. Then for me, the next challenge comes because my whole philosophy in advising artist estates is based on the fact that I believe in an artist estates must be active in 3 pillars to be successful. And that's the pillar of the art market, which is obviously important, not only for paying for all these activities, but it's also important that we have today a very strong interlinkage between the art market, the museums world, and academia. What is bought is shown in the museums, what is shown in the museums is bought. So you need the 3 pillars, museum, academia, and art market, and you have to have, as an artist estate, a proper strategy towards all 3 pillars. And only if you have developed this strategy, I then advise that you then go to the lawyers and start talking to the lawyers what would be the proper legal vessel for all of this. And not start with the legal vessel, because the strategy has to be formulated first. And then it's much easier for the lawyers, it's much easier for everybody else to then look how to make it happen in a legal structure.
Thanks a lot, Loretta. And actually, that was something that was mentioned also in the first podium here, the discussion between the public and the private, right? In the administration and the museums and the galleries. So you were saying it again, it's the 3 pillars, the art market, the museums, and the academy. Can you say a bit more about that? Is there also, do you see a tension there? Or you were saying that, you know, you need a good strategy to actually address the 3 of these pillars in a tension, I guess.
No, I don't see a tension, actually. I see a chance of really engaging these 3 different groups, because they are different groups and they need different things. To give you examples, with the estate of Hans Arp, when we started working with them, after publicizing, which was the most important thing, a proper catalogue raisonné to give the market as well as the academic world trust into the work, we started to set up a series of conferences, biennial conferences, and we did always do that in cooperation with large museums. We did in cooperation with the Kröller-Müller in the Netherlands. We then went to do a cooperation with the Fondation Bayerle, with the American Academy in Berlin. And by that, we tried to involve 2 of the 3 pillars into this initiative, which was the museums world, by doing it in cooperation with the museums, and at the same time addressing all the young academics to join this. Because with Hans Arp, for example, it was also that he had kind of fallen out of fashion in the academic world, which can happen. Then young doctorates don't write theses about the artists anymore. They're not interested in the archives. And we wanted to kind of rejuvenile the also academic discussions. So we paired this initiative with the conferences with a scholarship initiative, where we gave out scholarships, and they are much lower than what you're doing at the Lee Krasner and Jackson Pollock Foundation. We're talking here somewhere between 1,000 or 5,000 euros. But for a young academic writing a paper on art, that is already a lot. And if we bring them, we pay them the transportation cost to the archives in Berlin, etc. And we've been doing this now for almost 13 years. And it's really, really interesting because we see suddenly younger artists being interested. I mean, it helped that then Sophie Teuber art became so popular and the whole female discussion, etc. But at the same time, the first scholarships we gave out like 10 years ago, those people have now become curators in museums. So again, there's the two pillars which intervene. And they have art and Sophie Teuber art in their backhead. And they come back to us and say, we would like to include them in that exhibition. We would like to do a monographic exhibition. So it's really proven successful already.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. It's something that at Pollock-Krasner we're very mindful of, and fortunately both of our artists now have their catalog raisonnés. But with the idea, for Lee Krasner, hers was published in 1995. Should we do a supplement? The time you want to keep that fresh. Should we digitize them? That's another big question, but I think that will help with scholarship. I think the narrative has changed too, that we're noticing. Lee Krasner is getting a lot more attention and is brought into the limelight, and so it's easy to demonize Pollock. It always has been easy to demonize Pollock, and I think our goal is to sort of shift that narrative too. And Pollock wasn't a demon, and to keep the narrative positive about what an incredible creative he in fact was, rather than just say, oh, it's a drip painting. So I think, even with an established artist like that, we're mindful absolutely of one of your pillars, which then feeds into the others. So.
But I think also with your example, it's beautiful how the legacy of an artist can actually then contribute also to helping other artists. Yes. And so also something that was mentioned this morning was this idea of that we are right now creating the memory of the future, right? So how also to take care of whatever is created today of contemporary art, because it is actually the memory of tomorrow, and so it can help also to save that memory. Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we talked about this when we were on stage chatting earlier. I think it's something that a lot of artists are looking to, and I think with the digitization of our correspondences, you think about what's going to be lost. Thinking about scholarship and archives, and to go to, for example, I'm going to use Lee Krasner as an example. All of her papers and all of Pollock's papers she donated to the Archives of American Art in New York. They were all scanned. Anybody can go on and you can see Lee's postcards when she was in Paris and telling Jackson who she danced with whom, and what parties she was going to and what artists she was visiting. And I feel like with the digitization and everything going to email, we're going to lose a lot of that, particularly with this generation. And how is that going to impact future research? So I think it's really important that we can archive whatever we can. And I think, in terms of bodies of work, though, what do artists do with them? And I think, Loretta, you deal with this probably all the time. You've got sculptors with storage units, and it's expensive, and conservation of work is expensive. The artist I was referring to earlier told me, with the $2 million, if she can't find the right home and the right structure to support her work, her last work of art will be to destroy it all and document it. That's a tragedy, but she would rather bury her first child than let it just sort of go to the wind. And I think that's something that a lot of artists are struggling with right now.
We were also discussing how the way that legacies are dealt with in a specific country reflect on the role that the arts and culture and artists in general play for a society. So, you know, what does that tell us also about the place that these people have in our societies? So in a way, my question would be, would we need, because that was something I was reading also about the Krasner and Pollock Foundation, that actually the New Deal played a quite important role in the actual, during the training of the two artists, because thanks to the program, the employment programs by Roosevelt, it was actually possible that artists were freed from the, let's say, market tensions, and they could actually, you know, work and experiment also quite freely. So what is the role today? You know, how can artists find this place, and do we need, in a way, a new deal also for culture or for the arts?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. The WPA basically kept Pollock and Krasner alive for, you know, paid all their bills, right? Paid them as working artists to create murals, and, you know, you can even mosaics, and for at least 5 years, which is, you know, an amazing program. I think that the National Endowment of the Arts attempted to maintain that tradition in the US, and for years they gave individual grants to artists, until this photographer named Mapplethorpe came around, and a lot of very conservative politicians absolutely freaked out, and the money to, it's not having trust in individuals. So the government did not trust that those individual grants were going to be spent on appropriate, what they deemed appropriate artwork. So they stopped that individual granting program, which was a real tragedy for the philanthropic world in the United States. Now they only give grants to organizations. So I think it would be wonderful if we could have another New Deal. I don't know if that's realistic in the current climate, at least in the US. It's a little trying right now, if any of you are, it's a struggle. So while it would be wonderful, I don't think it'll happen.
Loretta, what would you say for the European or the German context?
I was just thinking about it, and I think it's a really interesting question. And to my mind came the comparison to literally artist estates of writers, because in Germany we have a great institution called the Marbacher Literaturarchiv, which is world famous, and which assembles all the artist estates on the state's costs in a very professional environment. But there's one fundamental difference, and that is the much more easy way to storage the archives of writers and the estates of writers. And so I think you can't ask for example, the German or the Spanish state to create a central warehouse. And I think there would also be a great danger that it's everything buried there, more or less. But I think what would be really, really helpful is if there would be grants for setting up, for the setting up costs of an artist estate during the lifetime, to pay lawyers, to pay professional advisors like the Institute for Artist Estates, to do all the archiving work, and to, by that, keep the work alive for future generations, and to help this transition into the posthumous world for the work. And I think, Caroline, the story you were just telling about your artist friend, I mean, that's really touching. Just imagine an artist working on their oeuvre a full lifetime and even considering the option of destroying it at the end of their lifetime. And I think that makes so clear how important it is to have grants for archiving estates and setting up proper structures.
I think I would also like to open to the public and see if there are any questions. Feel free to speak in English or in Spanish. We will, you, Caroline, you have the translation there. And Loretta, we will see if I do the translation or how we do it. But you speak in English.
I guess
You're listening to me. Well, me escuchan. Ellas no. Okay. Preguntan en español, son dos preguntas y luego la traslado al inglés. A mí me gustaría que Carol...
I would like, Caroline, it's a legal issue, but it's key. And it's been raised with Fernando, speaking about the good community. If the will of the artist is clear, if you use the state to a foundation and you give it to a foundation, this state is blocked, is out of the market, cannot be exhibited, cannot be sold, cannot be done.
Entonces, como habéis visto,
Land, it's a block. So the Pollock-Krasner Foundation has
posibilidad de venta de su propio legado, lo cual no implica ningún problema desde el punto de vista
a
conceptual.
preemptive selling program, and they even get income for copyright rights. Is a living legacy, is perpetuating of being in the market by the will of the artist. I think it's interesting, that vision. We can manage the legacy as if we were the very artist, not creating more work, but fulfilling the will, in this case of Lee Krasner, stating that this whole money should be used for grants, lots of money that allow for artists at the beginning of their career, they are able to eliminate the economic difficulties and to be solving problems. I would like, Caroline, can you explain us how do you structure legally the possibility of selling the posthumous work? Do you have a committee to decide about that? And for Loretta,
I just was wondering if you were talking about Europe and the situation around here. We don't have a solution, a formal solution in Spain for all the cases we are dealing with. But I think if we are talking about this Europe as the last place for the culture in the world, that's what we got. That's what we got. Then this new idea of being the last resistance of the creation in the world, I think that should be supported by the public budget in each country and also in the EU, because at the end of the day, the new Bauhaus that they call should be based on culture and ideas. So why don't part of these enormous budgets that we have in Europe could be dedicated to complete, of course, the private activities of foundations and other instruments of legacy statements, but supporting all them, because at the end of the day is what we got. What we are doing now and we have now as a creations will be the future assets to be shown to our future child and civilization. No sé si se ha entendido.
Go ahead,
Okay, great. It's an interesting topic. Initially, as I mentioned, Krasner had some investments when she died, and then the board was formed, and her closest art advisor, she made a trustee of both her will and was our first board president, and that was Eugene Thaw. Thaw was a very esteemed, he didn't really even have a gallery. He was more an art advisor and old masters, and then abstract expressionism. He actually co-authored the Pollock catalog raisonné, and he really shepherded the sale of the artwork to build our endowment so that we could start making grants. And at that time, and even now, we work very closely with our two galleries. Washburn Gallery represents our Pollocks. Casman Gallery in New York represents our Krasners. And we very carefully sell work. So we have a small committee. If, for example, we have probably 8 or 10 very major Krasner paintings, 3 by 5 meter, museum quality paintings. We're not selling those. So we are holding a number of major paintings for our collection. And at some point, to steward Krasner's legacy, we will do either a partial sale donation to an appropriate museum, so that her work and those pieces can be in public collections on view. So we're always looking at, and the committee is always looking at, what collections is Krasner represented in, what countries is she represented in. I don't know if there's a Krasner in Madrid, for example. I don't think there is. So, that's something maybe we should talk about, So I think that we're always mindful of that. And in terms of the Pollocks, we have a handful of smaller paintings and a lot of very good works on paper. I think that, again, we are not reactive with our sales. So it's not, oh, we're giving away $3 million, we need to sell a painting to do it. So our cash projections for the next 5 years are very carefully managed so that we're not going to have a fire sale on one of our pieces to fund our expenses. So it's thoughtful, it's mindful, it's a small committee, and we partner, to Loretta's point earlier, with our galleries, which is the market, right? So, and we're looking to place those pieces in the museums. So again, it's 2 legs of that 3-legged stool that Loretta was referencing earlier.
And Loretta, your reaction to Roger's commentaries also on the role of Europe and, for example, this initiative of the new European Bauhaus?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. The problem is that artist estates have a very small lobby or no lobby at all. I think we have just in the last 10 years seen a slow professionalization of the field in Europe. I would say 20 years behind what has happened in the United States earlier, as I described before. And it's, I think, something we all should jointly think about, how to team up in Europe and really create a lobby for this. Because as we all know, only with a lobby representation things work on a Brussels level. And I think that's the to-do from this discussion.
Another to-do for the foundation. Build a European lobby. Very good. More questions?
I have
sorry.
it here. Sorry. I wanted to ask to Caroline about, did it ever happen that, for example, the foundation sold the work to a particular, not to an institution, and it happened that this particular client wanted to sell the work, like put it back in the market? And my question is, do you have like non-resale agreements or the accessioning agreements with institutions?
We don't. So institutions, if they buy a piece or an individual buys a piece, we hope when we sell a piece to a collector that they will promise to, oh, we'll give it to the Whitney Museum. You hope that they do that, but we don't bind them.
And is there any reason why you don't do that?
It's not something that's really done in the United States. Yeah. It's, I think, more typical here, but we don't. Most museums, if they're going to invest in a Pollock or a Krasner that they purchase from us, it's going to be fairly recently. It's going to be within the past 30 years, and it's likely, at least now, they're not going to deaccession it. But to your point, maybe it's something we should think about. Always looking for, to make sure that we are stewarding the legacy. But up until this point, we have not put clauses in.
Okay.
There was a question down here.
It's for both. The question is for both. I think it's a great chance because you are 2 experts from 2 countries, 2 completely different economies and with artists that are with very different trainings and ways of doing. So here, I'm really envious because we have no a law for endowments here, because that's the private part that together with the state will facilitate the acquisition of both public and private collections, works for those important legacies. I think that everybody, we know the work of Pollock and Krasner, and we know the effort of both artists and mostly of Krasner. If we have any archive, it's because of the work of Krasner for both works. I would like to know, I've been quite interested about the link mentioned by Caroline, sorry, Loretta, about the link to the university, but also the United States has that link, so the academy is not divorced from artistic life, like here. But on the contrary, it is linked to the university. In the United States, you have museums at the colleges, campuses. So that link, I think, is quite encouraging, quite formative, and it entails great responsibility, and also the law for private foundations that facilitates all your work.
Maybe I would just quickly translate for Loretta, who has listened to the English translation. So Loretta, the comment was that, first of all, she's very envious of...
No, I had the English version.
Ah, you had the English version. Ah, perfect.
Yeah, it worked. Thank you.
Even better. Okay. Then, Loretta, do you want to react first?
I would like to concentrate on the last aspect of this linkage between university and artist estates. And I think there are two aspects to it. The one is the link between the estates fostering the remembrance of an individual's work to the universities, and I talked about how that can be done before, how to keep the interest of young academics alive in the archives. But there's also a second link, and I think that's an important one to stress. That's the link to the universities about teaching about how to deal with artist estates and how to teach, how to develop, how to foster young academics becoming interested in the field of artist estates to maybe later manage an artist estate, and to see that also as an option for talented young art historians. And there, at least in Europe, is still a lot to be done. The Goethe-Institut, for example, which is one of the leading institutions on the topic in Europe, puts the whole topic of artist estates under their preservation studies. I know, for example, Christian Scheidemann, who is born German but has worked in New York all his life as one of the main conservators there for contemporary art, is now teaching, I think, in Chicago. And he did a lot of thinking about how to do the conservation of contemporary artist legacies from the conservatory point of view. But to my belief, it belongs even on a more meta level in the university field, and not only in the area of conservation. And I think that's also one of the to-dos of a lobby program. And that's why I'm trying to give as many lectures at universities as possible to raise the awareness of the importance of this field, also as an educational field for young art historians.
Caroline, do you want to react also to the connection?
I mean, I think it's a very interesting topic. I think that I think it's twofold. I think it's learning or keeping the artist in question or the estate in question. Let's use Pollock and Krasner as the example, in the forefront in terms of what's being taught by art historians. And to that end, that's something that's important to us at the foundation. And for example, through Stony Brook University in New York, who actually, we gifted the house and study center where Pollock made and Krasner worked in that big barn studio. We just funded a fellowship for abstract expressionist fellow to go every year for 9 months. So we gave them a $200,000 gift towards an endowment to do just that, to foster, younger scholars to go and study abstract expressionism. The other side of it is the sort of arts and administrative curriculums at, let's say NYU or the Institute in New York. I think that this is not a part of the curriculum. I think Loretta should come to New York and talk to them about, setting something like this up. I think that it would be very valuable for art administrators to have more background in this. There is a very interesting organization that's based out of the Aspen Institute in Washington, D.C., and it's called the Artist Endowed Foundation Initiative. Christine Vincent is the executive director there and has been for over 25 years, and she has really charted the growth of artist-endowed foundations in the U.S. And she would be, somebody that I think could be very helpful because really it's been private, and that's a private foundation. So again, I think if it permeates the school curriculums more, we'll have a better shot of making more impact.
There was another question over there.
Hi. I have a question for Caroline, another for Loretta. The question for Caroline, when we're just talking about the grants, and as an artist myself, I didn't get a Krasner grant yet, but I got other grants, and I would like to know you share your experience when you get a grant, like what I did. Sometimes you're very happy and then it becomes a damnation because there's legal things, the taxes. So I would like to know if you cater as well for legal advice or financial advice to the artists, and if you have found any of those situations and what's your view on it. And for Loretta, I'm not very keen on legal and financial things, but basically what we're talking about is two possibilities for legacies, which is the foundation and the artist state. And I would like to know if there's like a in-between sort of possibility, because I have the legacy of my father, who was a photographer and died very early. And it's not really a legacy, it's more like an archive, it's a small thing. He's dead, so he can hear me. It's a bit of a second-rate sort of state, okay? So it's like, it's not one thing or the other, but it would be interesting for academy, it would be interesting for exhibitions, it would be interesting for other things. So how is there a possibility of have a simpler sort of way of make it like visible, and as well to deal with it, not having to go into the bother of foundations and boards and all that. I don't know if I'm clear enough.
Loretta, do you want to start?
Well, in Europe, we're quite lucky because we are not so much under the tax stress in these questions as many American estates are, especially if a lot of works are left, where you're forced into this foundation structure much more than you're forced into it in Europe. And I have to admit, I'm not a great fan of the foundation model, although it's kind of always perceived as the one only great model, because at least in Europe, we have a lot of regulation around foundations. And it limits freedom in the development of a foundation as well. And it costs more money to maintain a proper foundation than it would cost to maintain like a normal limited. And if there's not really a huge estate there, I often look into alternatives to a foundation structure. And so I totally understand your question. And there are a lot of in-betweens where but that would be go into too detailed now into legal aspects, but where within a smaller, not regulated structure, you as the artist can leave regulations behind, which still give a certain limitations to the freedom of those taking care of it later, but without having the whole state legal side around the foundation. And I'm very much sure that this exists the same in Spain as it does in Germany or the UK. And the second aspect I was thinking of when listening to the story of your father, I mean, that's a situation where it's really worth looking into maybe granting the archive to a university or to an institution, which find it interesting, although there might not be a huge art market to support a individual formation of an estate, but they could have the funds, if it's art historically important, to give it to young scholars and let them work with it.
Caroline, do you give legal advice?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to give advice. I think that our grants are taxable. It depends on the tax code, at least in the U.S. And so the artists that we give grants to in the U.S. work that into their budget and it's worked into the grant amount. So if we award a $35,000 grant and you know that you're going to end up paying $5,000 or $6,000 to the government, we up the request to incorporate the tax amount. So that's something that we work through. We have a very hands-on grant process. Once you sort of work through the first round, the first phase of our grant selection process, at that point, that's when an artist would work one-on-one with someone on my staff who would help work out a budget. If you wanted the help, we lend it. We help you with your project budget, should you need the help. Some artists come to us, here it is with a bow, and here's our request. Other artists, really ask for the guidance, and we're happy to provide it. But usually that tax amount is worked into the final grant because we understand that there are different tax codes in the 79 countries we've given grants to. We always recommend when we're working with an artist to fine-tune their proposal, to talk to their accountant or to someone who can help them because we can't know the tax code, so then they come back to us. It looks like we won't have to pay tax. If you write a letter saying it was a competitive process, different countries have different quote unquote rules. So we try to work that out at the beginning because our grant numbers do vary. So you can ask for $15,000, you can ask for $50,000. It just depends on what your proposal is for. So we try to work that out at the beginning. In terms of legal advice, we try not to give that. That's what the lawyers are for. We try not to give legal advice because we just don't have unlike Loretta, I don't have that expertise. So
I'm sure that we could be continuing talking a lot, but they're giving me signs that we should. Is there Concha? No, a last question. Concha, do we have a microphone?
Should I speak in English or in Spanish?
You can
English would be great.
Two of them have the translation.
I speak in Spanish.
I have a question for Loretta. Is there any initiative to face this topic of legacies in Europe as European Union? Is there any, or could you imagine that
que varios países europeos,
several European countries, like in other circumstances, could pose this issue to the European Union. It would be fundamental.
Again, I couldn't agree more. And there is not a European initiative on it. And I think it's a question of putting it on the table in Brussels through lobbying this.
Yes, I agree. I think we all do. No, thanks a lot to our both distinguished guests. Thanks a lot. It was very, very interesting, very, I think also inspiring, eyes-opening. And thanks a lot also to the public. And I hand over to Maria for some organizational, no, we just continue with the next podium.